and thank you for joining us today in this very special podcast. My name's Samara Riaz.
And I'm Matthew Powell.
And welcome to the episode where we're discussing patient groups, communities, and where they're built from based on lived experiences, the elements of collective strength, and ensuring that no one faces rare disease alone. And throughout this series, we're exploring how patient groups form, why they matter, and the extraordinary impact they have on families, clinicians, and the future of care. So today, we're joined by Jonathan Bracey, founder of MVA Society, whose story sits at the heart of why patient groups exist in the first place. He founded the MVA Society, a space to bring visibility to a condition few have heard of, to connect families who felt alone, and to really create resources and hope and research in this space. So welcome, Jonathan, and thank you so much for being here today.
Hi, thanks for having me.
You've done some amazing things over the last few years, but let's step back to the moment George was diagnosed and confirmed. What stood out for you most from that experience?
Sadly, not many good things. I mean, for us, it was a complete bolt out of the blue. We don't have a history of cancer in our family. We surprisingly don't have a history of MVA in our family. Neither does my wife. So George got sick the day we returned from our honeymoon, which was about 6 weeks before he had his diagnosis. During that 6-week period, we were in and out of hospital multiple times in our local hospital, St Mary's, and then eventually we went down to King's College Hospital. And we believed there was an issue with his liver, and the issue in his liver was that there was a blockage in his bile duct. And the blockage, we were led to believe, was just a sludge that would be able to be removed somehow, and that would free things up, and that would put George back onto sort of a normal footing again. But when the biopsy came back, it came back with extremely distressing news, and I said completely out of the blue that the blockage wasn't. Well, the blockage was a blockage, but it wasn't just a sludge; it was a tumour, and a fairly rare tumour at that, a rhabdomyosarcoma. So all of a sudden, you kind of get immersed in this new world of I guess kind of things you've never had to understand before. And it comes as a complete bolt out of the blue. It's like being dropped into a completely alien environment, and you kind of have to respond as you find yourself. I think I don't know whether you can predict how you're going to respond. I don't know whether there's a right way or a wrong way, but I have a distinct memory an image in my mind of when that news was given by the doctor and the nurse who were still in touch. We were a little bit naive to it all, and certainly quite numb to it all. And I remember writing down on a piece of paper, or asking them to write down on a piece of paper the word rhabdomyosarcoma, because I'd never heard of it before, and I certainly didn't know how to spell it. I didn't know what it meant, and I needed to have it. I needed to have it written down, so I could talk to other people about it, and I could start thinking what we could do. And your brain starts to, my brain kind of, after probably an hour of this settling in, kind of went into what are we going to do about it? What can we do about it to fix the problem? What can we do to move it forward? How do I kind of communicate this fairly huge news to your friends and family? And that in itself is a challenge. And one of the best things that we did, that I remember doing at that period of time, after a couple of days, is you phone your mum, you phone your dad, you phone your friends, you phone whatever, and you have the same conversation 10 times, 20 times, and then each of those 10, 20 people come back to you with points and questions, and then you go back to each 20 of them, but by that time it's not 20, it's 40, and it was literally occupying your entire day just returning phone calls to people and messages. So what we did is we set up a WhatsApp group, and we just added friends and family to it as we went along, and it was one of the most sort of efficient ways of communicating and letting people kind of understand where we were.
Interesting that you mentioned around the the things that you've remembered from that time, and a lot of it is around that community and the support and the family around you that's really enabled you to get to really feel like you were supported at that point, where despite the influx at the start, you still wanted some support along the way. And the meals, I mean, that again, the WhatsApp group, this is all really feeding into that whole connectivity and the community aspect, which I think leads quite nicely into Matt's point.
Yeah, actually, it's funny, something you mentioned there when you said they all started asking you questions about, you know, what's going on, what's happening, and as though you are the expert here. In actual fact, you've just found out yourself, and you're scrabbling around trying to find out information about this. And so one of the questions was, you know, at what point did you realize there was a lack of information about, you know, the condition or communities that deal with MVA? At what point did you realize this, and what point did you start, you know, sort of thinking, I need to find out more here?
We didn't find out about MVA till about a month afterwards, until a month after diagnosis, or certainly 3 weeks after the cancer diagnosis. So George was diagnosed with rhabdomyosarcoma, and the first thing that we had to do is understand that condition. So you only find these things out, I think, in life when you're kind of immersed in it. So rhabdomyosarcomas come in a couple of different variants. There's and we apparently had the better type of rhabdomyosarcoma, and it was fusion negative, not fusion positive. I've no idea what that means, but that's what we were told. So it was the better type of it, and it was in apparently a favourable location. So suddenly we had a little bit of hope in terms of where we were with it. The favourable location from a understanding how you're going to get it out with the where it was in George's body was technically very difficult, but it was in a position that was deemed to be relatively safer than, for example, if it was in his head, but from a treatment perspective. Because of the cancer and because of certain other sort of characteristics that George had displayed over the last couple of years, one of the doctors we were under the care of, Sharon Jeter, who's now a trustee of the charity, suggested that George would benefit from an R14 test, which is whole genome sequence testing that's available on the NHS, carried out down in Exeter. And we agreed to do this test. So the R14 is 14 days later, you get the results of a whole genome sequence testing. So having just been diagnosed with cancer, which was a pretty traumatic experience, having gone up to Great Ormond Street, which again was a pretty traumatic experience, and getting things like central lines fitted so they could administer the chemo, and doing the staging to understand the extent, or fortunately the lack of extent of cancer within George's body. It was stage 1. It was confined to where the tumour was. The next thing that happened was we got the MVA diagnosis, and as I say, the bloods were taken. They went down to Exeter, and then 14 days later, literally an army of people arrived at our hospital door, because there's a ton of people, including multiple counsellors, doctors, geneticists, all looking pretty glum and gloomy. And then we were given the diagnosis that George has got this super rare condition called Mosaic Variegated Aneuploidy syndrome. So your first response is, well, what's that? And the kind of response was, no one really knows. No one. I've never. The geneticist who said he'd seen 20,000 patients had never seen a patient with MVA. Nobody in the army of people who came into the room had any first-hand information or any first-hand experience of dealing with a patient with MVA. We were told that there was very little knowledge out there on MVA. There was no treatment for it, no healthcare pathway for it, no centres of excellence for it, no research going on into it, no charities aligned to it. But hopefully you'll be okay, and keep your fingers crossed. And that was the kind of response we got. And you know, that could really say other than let's concentrate on the cancer, let's get through the cancer, and then we'll have further conversations about MVA in due course. and that's kind of how it was left, really. So we, at that point, we had two sort of parallel tracks running, two parallel projects. One of them was clearly the most important one, was to get George through the cancer treatment, because if we didn't get through that, the MVA bit was kind of irrelevant. But in the background, I kept kind of Googling MVA and trying to sort of see if there was any advocacy going on for it, if there were any charities going on for it. And I mean, we basically drew blanks. We found the odd paper. You know, if you stick it into Google, you find some related papers, but all the papers are completely disjointed. So there's no correlation between paper 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They're carried out by different people on different patients under different settings, looking at different aspects of it. So it's very hard to kind of draw any parallels. And the question I wanted to kind of know the answer to was the issue with MVA with the type of MVA that George has got is that it leads to cancer, and that's what led to the rhabdomyosarcoma. So there's a clear correlation between that. We got that bit. So the next question that kind of came to mind is, well, is George going to get any other cancers, and how long do people with MVA live for? And no one can tell us. No one still can tell us. And there's no data to say 40% of patients live for 5 years, or 20% live for 10 years. There's zero data on it. So as parents with a 2-year-old who's got cancer, you're kind of thinking, my goodness, where is this going? What do our lives look like for the next months, years, goodness knows, decades, dare I say? I don't know. And nobody knows. We kind of tracked down the authors of these papers, and I spoke to a few of them. And a few of them said to me, what can we tell you? And one of the questions I would always ask is, how long is my son likely to live for? And they said, we don't know. And that was a consistent message we got back. And that's I took that kind of as, my goodness, that means he could die kind of relatively young. My wife took it to be, well, actually, he might not die young. It might be that he lives to a much older age. But the fact of the matter is, we don't know. If you look at life philosophically, we don't know that for any of us or any of our kids. But we certainly don't know that for George. So our attention was dramatic. Was all focused on getting him through the cancer, and I think we did a really good job collectively on that. We had some good conversations with Dr. Olga Slater at Great Ormond Street, who is his principal oncologist. She found a centre she was at an oncology conference and found a centre in Paris, the Bicêtre Hospital, who'd done a study of about 30 kids with rhabdomyosarcomas in their livers. And we shared this information with the guys at King's College Hospital, who would be doing the operation. The guys at King's knew the guys at the Bicêtre Hospital, so we went over to France and had an international MDT meeting with them and came up with a plan of how we could resolve it, which was to use a new technology called NanoKnife in combination with resection to remove the tumour and to try and get what they call an R0 margin on it. Long story short, we did NanoKnife and a resection, 9-hour operation, and George had an R0 outcome. Professor Nigel Heaton was the guy who headed up the operation, and he spoke to us sort of immediately after George came out of theatre and said, thumbs up, that all went really well. We've got to wait for the labs to come back with the results from the samples. But he said, I think it went really well. The labs came back eventually and said it was an R0 resection. Fantastic. We then had to get George through the next really difficult period of George in intensive care, and then back into the ward, and then he got a really bad infection, and that nearly killed him as well. So because we'd had the operation, we weren't out of the woods. We had another couple of months of very difficult healthcare to manage with George, and that was through March and April 24, I think it was. 24. And then we were back up to Great Ormond Street, and George rang the bell on his 3rd birthday at Great Ormond Street to signify, he was kind of officially through his cancer treatment, and he was okay and could be discharged. Going through that journey kind of got into my head that actually that you can affect things as a parent, you can do things, and I felt it kind of gave me a superpower. I felt turbocharged all the time. I had so much energy during that period of my life that I felt I could almost achieve anything I put my mind to. It was as black and white as that. If I'm going to do it, I'm going to get it done. So we came out of ringing the bell in the May, and we had the summer at home, just kind of convalescing and enjoying the fact that we had our son at home and he wasn't doing chemo anymore and he was getting better. And then midway through or the end of the summer, we took his NG tube out. And that again, it was a big moment because it meant that he looked normal again, and he was growing hair back again. So we had a little boy back with no tube. And NG tubes were a pain because they come out. They cause quite a lot of sort of not serious issues, but issues to your day-to-day life. So glad we didn't have that. But then came other challenges, like how do we then give him his medication if he's not got an NG tube in? So we had a different set of concerns, but down on the spectrum in terms of worry, really. And it was at that point that I thought to myself, if we managed to get that result for George, groundbreaking surgery for George on his rhabdo, then why don't we just do something for MVA? And that's kind of what led to saying, well, let's just do something. Let's just start a charity and see what happens. And I thought starting a charity was going to be pretty straightforward. And bearing in mind at this point in my head, if I wanted to do it, I could do it because it was not going to be a problem. So I decided to sit up one night, and in my naivety, I could send these charity forms off to the charity commission, and some nice lady, probably called Barbara, would phone me up and talk me through all the bits that I hadn't completed or I'd completed badly and help me put it right. But I didn't get that response at all. I got a straight no to basically disappear and do it again. If you do it properly this time, not under the influence of alcohol. So that's a really good learn. Don't complete these forms after a bottle of wine. So I got a very clever friend of mine who's a lawyer, and she helped me complete the forms. And we submitted them, and it went through, and we got our sort of charity designation through on the 19th of November 2024, and that was the start of where we're at, really. During that period of time, you have to write your sort of governing document, and you have to get trustees on board, and fortunately the doctors who we'd met along the way either, I think, kind of wanted to support us, let's say, as best they could, and they agreed to be trustees of the charity, and a couple of my friends did as well, about thinking about what we could do to try and do more than just have a charity with a basic website. And it's kind of emerged from there. That was kind of just over a year ago that we set up. And I just feel that we have come such a long way in a year. It's been a really difficult year. It's been an all-encompassing year. But we've got, I look at it now. We haven't just got a website. We've got a really good website with some really good information on there for parents and healthcare professionals who want to know about MVA. We've had 2 families now contact us through the website. So people are clearly finding it. We're registered with most of the sort of big umbrella rare disease charity organisations, who this time last year I was contacting saying, can you help me with MVA? And they were like, we have no idea what MVA is, which is not, again, a surprise. But now they do know what it is, and MVA is on their website, and there's a link to our website. So we're now sort of findable. People are finding us, and we've got a number of examples where that's happened.
With that, I saw that you posted that you've met a family who's so that's a great first interaction and great. And
just last week. It was this week. It was this week. It was on Monday. It was on Monday. I get confused because there seems to be so many things happening sort of all at once over the past few months. This week being no exception. So on Monday I went to Barcelona. Monday was a really important day. It was the first day I met a family who've got 2 kids who are affected with MVA, and they found us through our website, which is fantastic. So I met them, And we also have a lab doing some work in Barcelona looking at RNA sequencing. So they have George's samples, and I introduced the lab and this family knew of each other. They hadn't met, so we all met together. And I think they're going to get the samples of their two kids who've got MVA, and hopefully the third child who doesn't have MVA. So from a research perspective as well, it was a day of quite significance, because all of a sudden they only had two samples of MVA kids anyway, George being one and another patient. So all of a sudden they doubled their number of MVA sort of patients who they could get samples from. So Monday was a really big day for the society, a big step forward. We've got.
I mean, firstly, that's fantastic news, and it's exactly what the sort of patient advocacy groups are there for, to try and sort of connect people. It's an ultra rare condition, so you're never going to have swans of people coming through the door to talk about it and to understand it. And I was kind of sort of wondering what your future thoughts about this patient group are. Like, obviously you can already connect with a few people. Is it to sort of develop the charity to go bigger? Is it to help more people? What's your sort of plans with MVA Society?
A really good question. So we've got a really clear mission, which is we're going to find a treatment by 2030.
Wow. Okay.
And I think that's an achievable goal. A treatment doesn't mean a cure, of course. A treatment means something that's going to affect it positively. We've got three buckets that three buckets that we're working to. So the first of those is continuing to create awareness and build the community. So Monday was a really important day in that. We know of about another 10 patients around the world. We're not in touch with all of them, but we know about them. And this time last year we didn't know of any. So we've come quite a long way. And hopefully this time next year, the 10 that we know about at the minute we'll have met 2 or 3 of them, and the 10 will turn into 20 or 30 or whatever the number is. So that's created. That's finding patients and also finding doctors and researchers who are interested in this field and want to be part of that community. So we're building that whole piece up, and to support that this year, we're going to hold an in-person workshop or conference, whatever you want to call it, in London. You're very welcome to come when we get a date for it, to bring together all of the community we know around the world, to pay for them to come to London. I suppose that's one of the benefits of having an ultra rare disease, that you're not bringing many people to London, but bring the people who we know over here, get the researchers talking to each other, speak to the parents who are involved, and have a nice dinner together, and try and kind of engender that community in sort of in person. So that's the kind of the first of the three. The second, and probably the most important one, aligned to the mission at the minute, is the research arm of it. So we've raised enough money in year one to fund a researcher for a period of time, our own researcher. So we're starting moving more quickly towards our mission. And then the third sort of pillar is fundraising, and we clearly need fundraising to fund what we're doing. So I think, for example, the cost of a researcher at the Crick Institute for 4 years is £600,000. We'll get that money. That's not a problem. But it's still, that's the kind of numbers you're talking. It's not small change. So we've kind of paid for a couple of years of that already. Whereas this time last year, I really had about a sheet of paper with a few sort of notes on it, talking to people, saying, how do I do this? What do I need to do? I mean, I was into
and that's where you start, right? You start off with a few notes, and then you've actually turned those into actions. And it's quite nice to hear that you're not only building a community, and you're helping that community find each other, but you're also funding research, which hopefully will find a treatment, or even if it takes longer to find treatment, but actually even just understand the condition more through research, because like, as you said, there's not many papers that you found where there's a consensus, and to be able to actually introduce new research in this space is fantastic. From your perspective, what's the most meaningful ways pharmaceutical companies can support patient groups, such as yourselves? Obviously not just through funding, but through partnerships or amplifying the lived experience. How have you come across those experiences?
So having worked in pharma for 25 years, I feel like I should have a head start, let's say, in terms of how to manage them, how to deal with them, how to interact with them, how to work collaboratively with them. But pharma companies are quite hard work. So the first thing is to actually get a response to an email, which is surprisingly difficult. Some companies are really on board with this. So Ultragenics, huge. They seem to make time for people like me. If I contact them, I get a reply, and I get a meeting, and I get a phone call, a Teams meeting with them, and it's a constructive call, and so on and so on. Other companies, there are a number who I don't need to name, who I'm trying to talk to, and there is just you try and contact people on LinkedIn, they either don't reply, or they tell you to use the info at X pharma company to come back to talk to you, and you email them and email them and email, and you get no response. And that's when it's really disappointing, because if pharma companies really want to put patients at the heart of what they do, then it is looking after people like George that I think makes a real difference. And in my experience, it kind of separates pharma companies who do work in the patient advocacy space and those who profess to but don't actually work in that space. So I'm having some, despite my background, I'm having some really mixed results at the minute in terms of being able to engage with pharma companies. And there's a few pharma companies who work in this sort of specialist space of chromosomal instability that is pretty key if we're going to engage with pharma companies. They're the people who we want to engage with, and see whether the research and the work that they're doing can benefit us, and the work that we're doing can benefit them. It is a two-way process. It's not just, I'm not phoning up asking them for money. I'm asking them for proactive collaboration.
So Jonathan, what actually on that, if you're an industry insider, you know how it works. If you've got a bunch of people watching this who are pharma executives, patient engagement people, what's your message to them? What would you say to them, to come and help you or help groups of ultra rare diseases?
So one of the problems we have, or one of the problems I have with the MVA as a founder of an ultra rare disease like this and running a charity, is the amount of workload that comes with it. Is you're literally dealing with someone like Cancer Research UK have an army of people who deal with this, and they're much bigger, I get it, but we still, even in a small charity like this, you still have the same amount of span of activities to do. You just don't do them as in depth or as well. And when you're trying to contact a pharma company, it's probably for a good reason, and all you need to get back is some acknowledgement and some of their time to make it immeasurably easier, rather than having to constantly chase up, and just that human kind of side of things, to make time to have the chat, to respond to an email, and not disappear into a black hole. That's it. You meet people at a conference sometimes, you exchange business cards or contact details, and then you hear nothing else ever again. And it's like, why were you even at the conference? If you're not going to follow up with people who believe that there's some value in a follow-up conversation, company, and manage your marketing budget, and because it's really it gets quite tiresome, when people just need to be people need to be genuine. They need to do what they say they're going to do. And if they go to a conference, it generally means that they want to interact with people. And if they want to interact with people, then follow up on it.
If you're somebody who's from industry and you're struggling, and if it was somebody who's never even stepped into industry and they've got a child and they're starting a patient group, they're almost really disconnected completely and probably would likely give up if they connect once and have no response or don't know which conferences to attend. So I think that it's really interesting hearing your struggles, because likely those struggles are probably amplified for someone who's had no connections within the space. So there definitely seems like there's a space to for pharma companies to step up a little bit more and do more in regards to the engagements with advocacy groups.
I mean, I think so. And I think one thing that I haven't mentioned that I think is really important and I benefit hugely from is the company who I work for. So I work for a company called Pharma who are based in the US. We've got a UK office. But TAN is all about increasing access to medicines for patients around the world. And so their mission is very much aligned with what we're doing at the MVA. It's about creating a treatment for MVA patients there, which aligns to increasing access for medicines to patients around the world with Tanner. And they've been an incredibly supportive and understanding organisations to me. And through the work we do at Tanner, it gives me a good network into pharma companies. So sometimes I can leverage that. Yeah, those relationships to what we're doing, but that only goes a certain. We don't deal with every pharma company, and actually a lot of the pharma companies who I'm trying to speak to through the MVA Society are quite niche, and they don't necessarily fit in with what we're doing in the day job. But I think so. My point around this is something that is hugely beneficial to people who are running charities is to have an employer who is really understanding and gets what you're doing and cuts you some slack and allows you to do it. So, Tanner are incredibly supportive to me and give me a lot of cut me a lot of slack in terms of the way I run my diary. It doesn't mean I don't do the work for them. It just means you do it in a slightly different way, and you maybe do it different times of the day or whatever. But having an understanding employer makes the world of difference to people who are running organizations like the one I'm running.
Yeah. So with that, we wanted to just obviously thank you for the conversation today. It's been really insightful, and you've provided us with a great perspective of where you initiated, your story began, and how you prioritise the importance of George's his health and his medical journey, and getting him to a space where then you felt that you were ready to now support the wider network in the community. And actually you've grown it so fantastically, and just from hearing the passion that you have behind it just demonstrates that that's where your commitment's coming from and your drive. And so what we want to just close off by saying, as always, this is just a close reminder that no one should navigate rare disease, any condition, alone. And whether you're a patient, a parent, or even just a supporter, there are many local and national sort of patient advocacy groups that are available, like MVA Society and others, that people can access and really support and grow that community stronger and allow everyone to connect. So I think anyone who's listening to this, would you say that you would recommend they reach out to charities, and even if they want to support them, regardless of even if they've got a person that they know who's living with that condition, you're always open, your doors are always open for that.
I think people who are like me, a rare parent, their doors are generally open, and they make time for people because they know the lived experience of what it's like to go through something like this, and they know the value that it gives people if you give them time and listen and help them in whatever way, shape or form that is. I get probably 2 or 3 cold random inquiries a month coming through from LinkedIn, from emails, for word of mouth, for people who are saying, my son, my daughter, my parents have got a condition. We've read your story. We don't know what to do. Have you got any ideas to help us? And without exception, I will respond. You respond to those with as quickly as you possibly can do. And that's the experience I've had from other rare parents who've been in this space, they always make time for you. And if you've been through this journey, you understand the difficulty of it, and you do make time for people. And that is one of the really big benefits, I think, of this community, that they do make time for each other. They do support each other, and that gives you a lot of strength. Actually, it gives me a lot of strength in terms of, you know, this maybe sounds a bit cliche, but you do have people who are there to help you, and whether that is having a good cry or moan about the situation that you find yourself in, or helping you with specifics around how to build your charity and build your organization out, because there are lots of parallels. You know, MVA could be the same as, you know, another ultra rare disease in terms of the structure of setting up a charity, a rare disease organization, fundraising, you know, research, etc., just through a different sort of therapy area, really. So there is a lot of strength, I think, in terms of the rare and the ultra rare community, which is powerful.
Absolutely. Well, with that, we just wanted to thank you for your time today, and really appreciate your insights and your engagement, and thank you so much for joining.
Thanks for having me.